The average 30-year-old earning $60,000 a year has a net worth of roughly $7,000. A 40-year-old making $80,000 typically holds around $18,000. And a 50-year-old pulling in six figures often sits at about $43,000. And none of this is some cherry-picked worst-case scenario. This is the actual middle of the pack, meaning half of everyone out there is doing even worse than this baseline. These are people with established careers, decent apartments, and car payments on vehicles worth more than their entire net worth combined. They are earning real, legitimate money. Across a 40-year working life, even modest earners will gross well over $1 million in total lifetime income, and yet 3 out of every 4 of them will never accumulate $100,000 in actual wealth. Not in a retirement account, not in a brokerage account, not anywhere at all. The money comes in, the money goes out, and at the end of every month, every year, every decade, the balance sits at essentially nothing, a rounding error in an otherwise successful-looking life. So here's the question that should genuinely unsettle you. Where does all of it actually go? The climb to $100,000 in net worth is a specific psychological gauntlet that most people fail without ever realizing they were even being tested. Once you understand why that number is so brutally hard to reach, you'll also understand why it's the only number that truly matters. Because there's a threshold effect that kicks in right at 6 figures that fundamentally rewires how wealth accumulates from that point forward. The first $100,000 is a war fought entirely with discipline. The second $100,000 is just arithmetic. So let's walk through the 4 traps keeping most people stuck below 6 figures, why your brain is essentially pre-wired to fall into each one, and what actually changes the moment you cross that line. Think of wealth building like one of those old arcade machines where you feed in quarter after quarter, and for the longest stretch, nothing happens. You're just watching money disappear as the machine takes and takes without giving anything back. But if you keep feeding it long enough, if you reach a certain threshold, the machine suddenly flips and starts spitting quarters back out at you, and eventually it's returning more than you're putting in. That's exactly how the first $100,000 works. You're loading the machine, and it feels like losing because you're funneling money into investments while your day-to-day lifestyle stays exactly the same. There's no immediate payoff, and most people quit during this exact phase because they don't realize they're still mid-load, mistakenly convinced the game is broken, when really they just stopped playing right before the payout began. The first trap is what I'd call the invisible tax, though most people know it better as lifestyle creep. Say you're making $55,000, getting by fine, and then you switch jobs and jump to $70,000, a genuine $15,000 win, right? Here's what actually happens next. That extra $15,000 gets silently allocated before you've even consciously decided anything. You move into a nicer apartment because you can finally justify the extra bedroom, and that's $4,000 a year gone. You upgrade your car because the old one felt embarrassing now that you're a real professional, adding another $300 a month or $3,600 annually. You start eating at nicer restaurants because you've earned it, another $2,000 a year. You swap the budget gym for the nice one, add streaming subscriptions nobody actually watches, refresh your wardrobe because you need to look the part, and suddenly that $15,000 raise has completely evaporated into $15,000 of brand new recurring expenses. You're earning more and somehow still have nothing left at the end of the month, and that's the exact psychological trap at work. Your brain doesn't compare your current life to your past life. It compares your life to your peer group and your new income bracket. You earn more, so you feel entitled to spend more, and the entire economy is engineered to help you do exactly that. Because every landlord, dealership, and retailer has figured out that when your income rises, They can simply charge you more, and they know you'll pay it because you've got the better job now and can technically afford it. Here's the part nobody wants to admit out loud. Feeling wealthy and actually being wealthy are not remotely the same thing. Feeling wealthy is a leased luxury car and a trendy zip code. Being wealthy is owning assets that could cover that same car and apartment without you ever working another day. One is a costume you're renting. The other is real economic power. The person earning $60,000 who lives like they earn $40,000 will always outbuild the person earning $120,000 who spends every dollar of it. It isn't even close because the math is unforgiving and doesn't care how either of them feels about it. Now you might be thinking, fine, but I still need a car and somewhere to live. And that's fair. Nobody's suggesting you live in a cave. The actual trap is the automatic instinct to upgrade your entire life the instant your income ticks upward, because that instinct resets your wealth-building progress back to zero every single time it fires. Get a 20% raise and immediately expand your spending by 20%. And congratulations, you've just started running in place, only now at a faster pace. The second trap is the payments mentality, and this one is so deeply embedded in the culture that most people don't even recognize it as a trap at all. Quick test: how much does a car cost? If your brain instantly converted that into a monthly figure, you're already infected. It's the financial equivalent of judging cigarettes by how satisfying each individual one feels, instead of tallying up the cumulative damage. Once you start thinking in payments, you lose all sense of the actual total cost. A $35,000 car financed over 72 months at 5% interest works out to $412 a month, which sounds perfectly manageable. You can swing $412. But here's what you've actually agreed to: paying over $35,000 total for something worth roughly $28,000 the second you drive it off the lot, meaning you're underwater from day one, and you'll be making that payment every single month for 6 full years before it's yours. Add insurance, which climbs because you financed a newer vehicle. Add maintenance, add registration, and that affordable $412 is really closer to $600 once you account for the true cost of ownership. And it's not just cars anymore. It's everything. Buy now, pay later on a couch, 0% APR for 12 months, that quietly jumps to 29% forever after. Installment plans for phones, laptops, furniture, appliances. The entire consumer economy has shifted toward getting you to think in monthly payments instead of actual sticker prices, because the moment you make that switch, you'll buy things you genuinely cannot afford. I was scrolling through payment calculators online recently, just out of curiosity, and there are calculators that will tell you exactly how expensive a car you can afford based on your income. And the number they spit out is always higher than what you should actually spend, because that calculator isn't working for you, it's working for the dealership. Here's the structural problem underneath all of this. Every one of these payments functions as an anchor, a recurring obligation that has to be satisfied before you can even consider investing a single dollar. You work, you get paid, and that money is already spoken for. Car payment, credit card minimum, student loan, furniture financing, phone plan. And what's left over? Maybe nothing. Probably nothing. This is precisely how people spend entire decades earning genuinely good money while building exactly zero wealth, because the income arrives and immediately flows back out to service debt on things that are actively losing value the whole time. It's an almost perfectly engineered system for keeping you broke while making you feel like a full participant in the economy. The third trap is what I'd call time arbitrage failure, though really, it's just compounding growth being denied the one thing it actually needs: time. Most people assume they can save their way to $100,000 by stockpiling cash in a savings account, Maybe a high-yield one paying 4% if they're lucky, telling themselves they'll get serious about actual investing later when they earn more, later once they understand the market better, later when life feels more stable, and later quietly turns into never, or turns into too late. Here's some math that should make you genuinely uncomfortable. Invest $500 a month starting at age 25. Assume an average 8% market return, and you'll cross $100,000 by your mid-30s. That's $500 monthly, roughly $35 a week, the cost of 3 drinks at a bar. Start that exact same $500 monthly habit at 35 instead, same 8% returns, and you'll land around $50,000 by your mid-40s, precisely half. Start at 45, and you're looking at maybe $20,000 by your mid-50s. Identical monthly contribution, identical return rate, wildly different outcomes, purely because of when the clock started. And here's what's genuinely wild. People will spend hours agonizing over which index fund shaves an extra 0.05% off its expense ratio, while happily delaying their first investment for 5 whole years because they're waiting to feel ready. That 5-year delay costs vastly more than a lifetime of expense ratios ever could. It isn't even a close comparison. The gap between starting at 25 versus starting at 35 is tens of thousands of dollars, potentially hundreds of thousands by retirement, purely due to time. And yet most people treat investing like some optional side project they'll get around to eventually, the financial equivalent of learning Spanish or picking up yoga someday. The market doesn't care one bit about your feelings of readiness. It doesn't pause and wait for you to figure things out. And every month you postpone is a month of compound growth you will never, ever get back. The fourth trap is asset confusion. Most people genuinely believe they understand the difference between an asset and a liability, but they don't, not really. They think their car is an asset. It isn't. It's a liability bleeding money every month while losing value the entire time. They think a designer wardrobe is an asset. It isn't. It's worth pennies on the dollar the moment you leave the store. Furniture, gadgets, collectibles, none of it is an asset. It's just expensive decoration. A real asset is something that puts money into your pocket. A stock, an index fund, a bond, a rental property done properly, a small business, things that generate cash flow or appreciate in value while you sleep. Whereas everything else, regardless of how nice it looks or what you paid for it, is a liability quietly costing you money to own. The middle class buys liabilities and calls them assets. The wealthy buy actual assets and eventually let those assets pay for the liabilities. That's the real difference, and it has nothing to do with income level. Plenty of high earners are functionally broke because every dollar that comes in immediately converts into liabilities. A nicer car, a nicer apartment, nicer clothes, more vacations, money flowing straight out with nothing ever flowing back in. Consider 2 people side by side. Person A earns $70,000 a year, lives in a modest $1,200 a month apartment, drives a paid-off 10-year-old sedan, and invests $1,000 monthly into a total stock market index fund. Person B earns $110,000 a year, lives in a $2,800 a month luxury unit, leases a BMW for $600 a month, and invests absolutely nothing, because after every expense there's simply nothing left over. 10 years later, Person A has surpassed $150,000 invested, compounding at 8% annually, while Person B has $0 invested and is still making lease payments on a car they'll never own. Person A ends up wealthier, despite earning $40,000 less per year, purely because of assets versus liabilities. Person A bought things that appreciate. Person B bought a lifestyle that evaporates the instant the paychecks stop arriving. So here's where it gets genuinely interesting. Why does $100,000 even matter this much? It isn't an arbitrary milestone. It's a real psychological and mathematical threshold. Once you cross $100,000 in invested assets, compound interest starts working harder than you do. At $100,000, an 8% annual return generates $8,000, roughly $666 a month in growth you didn't have to lift a finger for. Your money is now making money, and that $8,000 compounds again the following year. So in year 2, you're not just growing on $100,000, you're growing on $108,000 plus whatever fresh money you contribute. The snowball is finally rolling. Going from $0 to $100,000 might take 8 grinding years of disciplined saving and investing, but $100,000 to $200,000 might take only 4, and $200,000 to $400,000 might take just 3. The pace accelerates because you've finally fed the arcade machine enough quarters, and now it's paying you back. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's longtime business partner, put it plainly: get your first $100,000 by whatever means necessary. Walk everywhere, skip anything not bought with a coupon, just get there. Because that's the genuinely hard part, and everything after it is just math. Most people never cross this threshold because they fall into one or more of these 4 traps. They expand their lifestyle every single time their income rises. They finance everything and think exclusively in monthly payments instead of total real cost. They postpone investing indefinitely while waiting to feel ready. And they buy liabilities while genuinely believing they're building wealth. Every one of these traps resets your progress straight back to 0. You cannot compound wealth while spending every dollar you earn. You cannot build real assets while drowning in payments on things losing value by the day. And you cannot harness time if you keep pushing the start date further out. So what actually works? It isn't complicated, but it is genuinely hard. First, eliminate every high-interest debt, anything above 7 or 8%. Kill it immediately, because you mathematically cannot outinvest 20% credit card interest. It simply isn't possible. Pay off the cards, pay off the personal loans, get out from under that weight entirely. Second, build a $10,000 emergency fund as a genuine buffer, so you're not forced back into debt the next time your car breaks down or a medical bill lands on your doorstep. Park it in a high-yield savings account and leave it untouched, unless it's a real emergency. Third, automate your investing completely, setting up automatic transfers straight from checking into a brokerage account at minimum $500 a month if you can manage it. More, if possible, into a boring, unglamorous index fund like the S&P 500 or Total Market Fund, making it fully automatic so you never even see the money and can't talk yourself out of it later. And fourth, this is the one that truly separates the people who build real wealth from the people who stay perpetually broke. Live like you earn half of what you actually earn. I know that sounds extreme, but if you can sustain it for even 5 years, the compounding effect is genuinely absurd. Most people live at 100% of their income, some even at 110% financed, straight onto credit. If you can live at 50% and invest the rest, you will sprint past nearly everyone around you. It will not feel good at first. You'll drive the same car while your friends lease something new. You'll live somewhere smaller. You'll skip the fancy dinners and the weekend getaways. But in 5 years, that net worth will make the earlier sacrifices look genuinely trivial. And in 10 years, you'll be financially untouchable while everyone around you is still stuck making payments. The formula is simple. Income minus expenses equals your investable surplus, and time plus surplus plus compound returns equals real wealth. You need all 3 working together. A high income helps, but it's not strictly required. Plenty of people earning $50,000 a year will retire as millionaires because they mastered their expenses and started investing early. and plenty of people earning $200,000 a year will work until the day they die because they bought a lifestyle instead of assets. The real difference was never the paycheck. It's the gap between what comes in and what goes out, and how long you allow that gap to compound inside the market. Let's be honest about something. The road to $100,000 in net worth is genuinely not exciting. It's boring, repetitive, and mostly consists of watching your index fund tick up 3% in a given month and feeling authentically happy about it. It's driving a paid-off car for 8 straight years, while everyone around you finances a new one every 3. It's bringing leftovers to work while coworkers order delivery. It's saying no to trips and gadgets and upgrades because you're still feeding the machine. You're loading quarters into the arcade cabinet, and it feels like losing because there's no immediate payoff. The dopamine hit from a fresh purchase is real and instant, while the dopamine from watching your net worth slowly climb is delayed and abstract. Your brain simply isn't wired for that kind of delayed gratification, and that's exactly why most people fail this particular test. But here's what nobody bothers telling you. The moment you cross $100,000, everything genuinely changes. The second $100,000 arrives faster, the third arrives faster still, and suddenly you're building real wealth at a pace that would have seemed impossible back when you were sitting at zero. Because you've finally reached the point where the machine is the one paying you now. And to be blunt, the game is rigged against you. At the start, the entire economy wants you consuming, not investing. Every advertisement, every social feed, every car commercial, every credit card offer is engineered specifically to get you spending money you don't have on things you don't need, all to keep you locked on the treadmill. But if you can survive the gauntlet all the way to $100,000, you've made it to the other side, having proven you can delay gratification, resist lifestyle creep, sidestep the debt trap, and give compounding the actual time it needs to work. So remember 3 things going forward. 1. Invest at least half of every raise before you even think about upgrading your lifestyle. Automate it so the money simply disappears before temptation kicks in. 2. If you're financing anything other than a house, you're probably making a mistake. If you genuinely can't buy it in cash, you probably can't actually afford it. And 3. Start investing now. Not next month, not next year, right now. Open the brokerage account, set the automatic transfer, buy the index fund. Boring, unglamorous, consistent investing has quietly built more real fortunes than crypto hype ever will, because the people who actually got wealthy from index funds weren't trying to time the market, day trade, or chase the next meme stock. They simply kept buying the entire market month after month, decade after decade, and let compounding handle the rest. It isn't flashy, it isn't viral, but it works, so go get that first $100,000.